Okay, this is an update on the Conspiracy of Silence documentary, which discussed a pedophile human trafficking ring in Omaha, Nebraska. And I first covered this in my documentary series entitled Kings of the Occult Part 5 and Part 6. So in Omaha, Nebraska, children stated that very wealthy and prominent men were the main perpetrators, and names were mentioned like President Ronald Reagan and George Bush. As far as the perpetrators in the local Omaha area, the victims and witnesses named: Peter Citron, a newspaper columnist; Alan Baer, who was a business owner. For example, he owned Brandeis Catering, Pears Coffee, and South Roads Mall; and Lawrence E. King Jr., who is the manager of the Franklin Credit Union in Omaha, Nebraska, and he is also the chairman of the National Black Republican Council. So in the Conspiracy of Silence documentary and in other interviews given by John DeCamp, Senator John DeCamp, a point was mentioned that Lawrence E. King Jr., the manager of the Franklin Credit Union in Omaha, Nebraska, was not to be confused with the Larry King of CNN, the reporter Larry King. And he did that so many times that it was almost like a program to eliminate any guilt of the white reporter named Larry King from CNN. My guess is that children and these witnesses of these human trafficking rings named Larry King, the white reporter from CNN. And what you will learn through this report is that Larry King from CNN is one of the most wealthy men on the planet with many different identities. So I believe that the children victims, and other witnesses named Larry King, and in order to obscure that, they tried to confuse him with a person named Lawrence E. King Jr., who was supposedly an African American man who was the manager of the Franklin Credit Union that got shut down by the FBI for being involved in financial crimes. So Larry King, the white reporter from CNN, has been identified to be two men who are father and son and are both wealthy agents of the MK Ultra program and are wealthy agents of the British military media establishment. They own giant monopoly corporations and conglomerates. So Larry King, number one, has been identified to be the actor Robert Reed, who acted in the old TV show called The Brady Bunch. And his son, Larry King, number two, has been identified to be Howard Stern. Both of these individuals have also been identified as Peter Citron, the newspaper columnist from Omaha, Nebraska, who had been named by the children as a pedophile that was involved in the human trafficking ring. Actor Robert Reed was supposedly born in the year 1932, but in reality, he was probably born in the year 1922. And Howard Stern was supposedly born around the year 1954, but in reality, he was most likely born in the year 1944. So both Robert Reed and Howard Stern act as the CNN reporter Larry King, who has been identified to be Peter Citron, the newspaper columnist from Omaha, Nebraska. All agents of the CIA and the MK Ultra program have multiple identities, which they use in their different criminal projects in the MK Ultra program. In the media, and in the corporate world. So Robert Reed and his son Howard Stern both acted as Peter Citron, who was named as a pedophile from the Omaha, Nebraska area, involved in the human trafficking ring that was covered in many reports, including the 1993 Conspiracy of Silence documentary directed by Nick Gray. Robert Reed, also known as Larry King #1 from CNN, has also been identified as the serial killer Richard Speck, who murdered 9 student nurses in their townhouse in Chicago in the year 1966. Richard Speck was most likely around 44 years of age when he was caught for those crimes. CNN's Larry King being identified as the serial killer Richard Speck #2 implies that the people accused of molesting children in the Omaha, Nebraska area were doing more than just sexually molesting the children in these sex rings. They were also murdering children in terrible ways for what is believed to be murder for entertainment purposes. People have to begin to understand who these people are, like celebrity talk show host Howard Stern and CNN reporter Larry King. These are agents of the CIA. These are agents of the MK Ultra mind control program. They are members of the most wealthy families in the world, and they are all involved in large-scale international crimes. They are involved in invasions, wars, and the takeover of small nations like in South America. And after these groups take over these small countries and set up a puppet government, they begin to attack, kill, and exploit everybody in those countries. So these child molestation and human trafficking rings that we hear a little bit about in America, that are often called hoaxes or just rumors, are happening all over South America and the third world when these same groups take over these small, poor countries and begin to exploit the people. Actor Robert Reed, also known as Larry King from CNN #1, supposedly died in the year 1991 from cancer. He had kept it a secret that he was a homosexual and tested positive for HIV. In reality, Robert Reed probably lived at least until the year 2019. Just because he has HIV doesn't mean that he will die from AIDS. When you hear reports of child abuse rings, in many, if not all of the cases, it involves homosexual men raping children, like what is exposed in the Omaha, Nebraska pedophile ring. Often the reports involve the Roman Catholic Church, Roman Catholic priests, and Jewish rabbis molesting children, and the involvement of the most wealthy people in the world. This is all tied together, going back into ancient times, with the control of the homosexual clergy or priest class, which supposedly controls the royal class, which is underneath it. But in reality, the clergy, the priesthood, and the royal class, the aristocrats, are one and the same. The most wealthy aristocrats also act as priests and rabbis, going back into ancient times. So the truth is that they are just one group that functions through homosexual, sexual abuse programming. They sexually abuse and program children to grow up to be homosexuals. And they do this through religious orders or fraternal orders that state they are a secret society that all those people have to take oaths to, promising under the penalty of death they will never talk about what is going on in their secret societies. And a big part of that is homosexuals molesting children and murder for entertainment or human sacrifice rituals. So this group is always against traditional families. They're against traditional society and regular citizens because we want to protect our children while they want to exploit and rape little children. So these people will be your enemies until the end of time or until these orders are crushed out of existence. These religious, fraternal, or military orders have taken control of politics, corporations, and the media. This group has often been referred to as the Illuminati. And again, they are a homosexual or bisexual group of people that produces children, often through incest. They have different families that produce children through incest. If you read the different encyclopedia pages about the aristocrats or the royal class, you will read over and over again, they have to marry other people with titles, other members of their class. So they state that they often have to marry their cousins or their sisters and brothers or their uncles and aunts. So in turn, the children produced through these incestuous relationships possess very little intelligence. They possess very little true intelligence, very little independence, and they are very easy to control and program. When the regular people want to know why the world has so many problems and why the rich are so greedy, so selfish, and control the world in such a primitive and barbaric way with all these wars and all this greed that keeps everything good down, it's because you are dealing with a group of sadistic pedophiles that are inbred and mildly mentally retarded. You are never going to reach these people. These people will never grow a conscience and try to do what's right or try to do things differently. So this group is programmed to constantly strive to restructure the world, to function as a military slave state where human beings will eventually be considered a livestock, to be harvested, to be eaten and consumed. They favor monopoly corporations, giant conglomerates, and a two-class system, meaning the very rich and the very poor. They are opposed to the American model of a large middle class with many independent businesses that favor competition, a free marketplace, and constitutional rights. Actor Robert Reed and his son, Howard Stern, have been identified to be Vigga Hall Jr. and Vigga Hall III. It's spelled V-I-G-A, but they pronounce this name like a nickname, Vidge, V-I-D-G-E, Vidge. My grandmother, my father's mother, is Rowena Kelly Harwood, and her sister named Audrey married Vigga Hall I, who has been identified to be the President Harry S. Truman, also known as Corporate Raider Eli M. Black. They have two sons named Vidge Hall Jr. and Ben Hall. Vidge Hall Jr., also known as actor Robert Reed. Also known as actor Robert Reed. He was tall. He was around 6 foot 3 inches tall. However, Ben Hall, he was more around 5 foot 8 inches tall. And in my opinion, Ben Hall did not look anything like Vidge Hall Jr. Ben Hall more resembled Vidge Hall I, also known as President Harry S. Truman. Ben Hall has been identified to be one of the men who act as the former director of the CIA, named Leon Panetta. And this is all covered in my documentary series entitled Hall Cross Cult. And this is all covered in my documentary series entitled Hall Cross Cult. So President Harry S. Truman's son was actor Robert Reed, also known as the serial killer Richard Speck, and Richard Speck's son, serial killer Richard Speck's son, was Howard Stern. So my guess is that Harry S. Truman was a member of these secret societies, and he was secretly a homosexual man or a bisexual man. Due to their practices, for all I know, after marrying Audrey Hall, they could have murdered her and replaced her with one of their relatives. That is one of the major things these people specialize in doing. They create doubles by imitating other people and modeling themselves after people. And this is done through the MK Ultra programs, Monarch program. So President Harry S. Truman, also known as Corporate Raider Eli M. Black, also known as Vidge Hall I, his son, actor Robert Reed, is also known as the serial killer Richard Speck, who murdered 9 student nurses in the year 1966. So if you take a look at Richard Speck, look at the appearance of Richard Speck. Look at the look on his face. He is trying to represent himself as being very young and innocent. He looks shocked or confused in many of these courtroom photographs that he is even being accused of murder. This is going to be the look that you are going to see time and time again coming from these people who are the worst criminals, who are the worst sadistic pedophiles in the world. They have multi-personality disorder, and they go into a different personality, and they often act like little kids or young people who are innocent. That is what they are taught to do, to put on their baby face and act very innocent, especially when they are accused or caught for these crimes. And that is the same with Howard Stern. He puts on his Boy Scout face. This is a face that he borrows from a regular citizen that he has imitated for a long time. After viewing this movie and recognizing Howard Stern to also be known as Vidge Hall III, my guess is that one of the people that he imitates is my uncle, my mother's brother, named Jeff Cordova. Jeff Cordova is a very good man. He went to art school. He is an excellent artist. He plays guitar. He was hired to be in advertising for a while, but he is a very intelligent, creative, and good man. And that is one of the people that Howard Stern will imitate to appear like a good person, when in fact, I believe Howard Stern is one of the most evil people in the world. So if you view the Howard Stern movie entitled Private Parts that was released in 1997, you can often see the resemblance to his real father, actor Robert Reed. So at this point, I would like to discuss Howard Stern, his television show, which was on the E! Channel in the mid-1990s, and the Howard Stern movie. So Private Parts, the Howard Stern movie, is not portrayed to be a fictional comedy, but more like a historic reenactment of events in Howard Stern's life. Around 10 minutes into that film, when he is portraying his childhood, there is a scene of Howard Stern and two of his friends being driven to school by their mother, and they are all around 12 years old. And his two friends use the word nigger 3 times while stating that their town is becoming more and more black. There are more and more black people in their town. Then Howard Stern states that in high school, while in the locker room, all of the black students, all of the black boys had rhinoceros penises, which is also a racist comment. Then, while portraying his time in college, Howard Stern creates a student film and wins the award for Best Film. However, his film portrays Howard Stern as Jesus Christ, wearing a white robe and carrying a large cardboard cross and getting stabbed repeatedly by a woman with blood gushing out and splattering. And as he is being stabbed over and over again by this woman, Howard Stern repeats in a stupid voice, "Save me, save me, save me." So this is obviously an anti-Christian film portraying a violent stabbing attack on Jesus Christ while making fun of it. If it was a film showing an attack on a Jewish religious figure, it would be called anti-Semitic and containing messages of hate. So in turn, Howard Stern's film should be called anti-Christian and containing messages of hate and racism. So as the movie goes on, Howard Stern is portrayed as a rebel, an independent person who rebels against the upper management at NBC. After gaining success on another radio station, he is hired at NBC. And in this movie, NBC does not exactly know too much about Howard Stern's show. They just know that he is successful at a different radio station. And then they are shocked about the type of content, the sexual content that Howard Stern discusses on his radio show. So the upper management at NBC, upon hearing his material for the first time, is shocked. They wish they didn't hire him if he is going to do these sexual themed shows. So the upper management at NBC comes up with the idea to make working there so difficult that Howard Stern will want to quit. because if they were to fire him, it would mean a lawsuit for them. So that is the type of image that Howard Stern would like to promote. And he says the same thing in interviews, like when he was interviewed on the David Letterman show. He says that he hates the management at NBC because they always try to censor him. So Howard Stern is the upper management at NBC. Howard Stern's family and the CIA network that his family is a part of own NBC. NBC was founded in 1926 by the corporations RCA, United Fruit, General Electric, and AT&T. The United Fruit Company, which attacked and exploited Central America, is owned by Howard Stern's family, comprised of U.S. President Harry S. Truman, former CIA Director Leon Panetta, and actor Robert Reed, also known as CNN's Larry King, also known as the serial killer Richard Speck. At the United Fruit Company, they used the names Eli M. Black and Carl Linder Jr. So I will discuss the United Fruit Company in the next section of this lecture. If NBC did not like Howard Stern, not only would he be fired instantly, he would never have been hired. The debased sexual content featured on the Howard Stern show is exactly what the upper management at NBC, along with the establishment, promote. When these wealthy and prominent men are exposed by child victim witnesses, like in the Omaha, Nebraska, Franklin Credit Union child prostitution ring allegations, you will begin to understand that the most wealthy and prominent men and women who act as politicians, corporate directors, and celebrities are the worst caliber of sadistic, perverted scum in the world. I am not exaggerating when I state that since ancient times, they are involved in human trafficking, pedophilia, murder for entertainment, ritual murders, incest, cannibalism, vampirism, and necrophilia. In turn, these aristocrats, priests, and rabbis act as the world's politicians, corporate directors, and celebrities. And they have for you, the American public, debased, pointless, disgusting, and dumbed down movies and television shows like the Howard Stern Show. I first became aware of the Howard Stern Show around the year 1996. At that time, I worked for the Filene's department store in Danbury, Connecticut, in the electronics department. I worked the late shift from around 2 p.m. until 10 p.m. And when I got home at night, I would try to find something to watch on television. And there was very little shows of interest that I could find on basic cable television. So I remember that there was basically infomercials, cooking shows, and talk shows like the David Letterman show on NBC. the Howard Stern Show, which was on the E! Channel. So the Howard Stern Show was one of the only things that they had for young people on basic cable television at night. And it consisted, for the most part, of Howard Stern inviting female strippers and porn stars onto his show that he would basically talk dirty to and ask them to describe sexual acts and their breast size. And besides these prostitute strippers, he would interview dwarfs, retarded and deformed people, as well as celebrities such as the Insane Clown Posse, which is a rap group. So I remember clearly what all these strange guests had to say was extremely boring and pointless. They were not interesting or creative in any way. The guests knew very little about the world. There were no good stories that they told. The people interviewed were not intelligent nor informative in any way. And for the most part, the guest would get quiet and wait for another stupid question from Howard Stern. So the interviews would go nowhere. So let me explain why it is like that with many of the celebrities. Rap artists like the Insane Clown Posse or Eminem are not real rap artists. They are actors and performers who act in hundreds of different roles in the media. For example, one of the actors who act as Eminem has been identified to be the actor Elijah Wood, who also appeared in fantasy movies like The Lord of the Rings, where he acted as the dwarf Frodo Baggins. Elijah Wood is not going to know anything about being an underground rapper. He is not going to have any stories to tell you about being an up-and-coming underground rapper, what his youth was like as an underground rapper. He is not going to have any stories for you. He is not going to have any life experiences. He is not going to know very much about life on the streets. If they manage to come up with something like that, they have stolen those stories from regular people who you are not allowed to see. But rappers like Eminem or Insane Clown Posse are just temporary roles assigned to different professional actors and entertainers. The Insane Clown Posse will wash off the makeup and then be interviewed as stockbrokers on the news the next day. Who these actors are portraying are not real people. It's an invention of the media. It is a fictional role that they have developed. Eminem or Marshall Mathers has no real history. Several different actors have portrayed Eminem. He is not a real person. So when he is interviewed about his life, he is not going to have too much to say. So that is the point of the establishment only promoting their own, who are professional spokespeople and entertainers in the media. They do not want any real or regular people to appear in the public eye. They do not want real artists, real musicians, real writers, real thinkers, real politicians, real business entrepreneurs to appear in the media. because those people will always speak about real things. They will be honest with the public. They will inform the public. They will inspire the public. They will let the public in on hearing about their life, living in a different area of the country or the world. They will speak honestly about real things, and that alone poses a threat to the establishment insiders who are criminals and who lie about everything. Everything is a lie or a fabrication. These days, in the year 2025, most of the stories in the news or in the media are fabricated events. It's like Hollywood has taken over the news and the media. The news is just a series of more fictional or fake stories that the establishment comes up with because they completely control that. There is not going to be any real people involved. The stories that they come up with are fake from start to finish, so they control the entire thing. So in my other documentaries, I discussed a New York City cable access television show called Beyond Vaudeville, which supposedly featured the amateur or street talent of regular citizens from New York City. For example, musicians, comics, or people with any act or talent whatsoever. But that is not the case. Regular people continuously auditioned to appear on the Beyond Vaudeville show and were continuously turned down. And the Beyond Vaudeville show chose to feature a group of odd freak insiders with no talent whatsoever. It was like they went out of their way to create a show that was pointless and boring and would alienate the audience. So this is the best of New York City. If we were to comb the streets looking for talent on the streets of New York City, this collection of oddball freaks is the best they could come up with. Same with the Howard Stern show. They make it seem like Howard Stern is combing the streets of New York City looking for strange people or unique people to interview. And the best he comes up with are these porn stars and these strange people like Hank the Angry Dwarf, or this deformed guy named Beetlejuice, or this mentally retarded guy who is supposed to be funny because he is retarded. That is just the best entertainment that Howard Stern could find in New York City. They did the same thing with the cable access show called Beyond Vaudeville. This is basically an insult to the viewers and to the citizens of New York City. This is something like an inside joke. These people from these aristocrat families, from these secret societies, they hate the general public so much. They love to cut you completely out of the entire media. And they would rather put on these inbreds and these retards that really have nothing to say, that really have no point being on television. Anything is better than real Americans, than the real artists, musicians, comics, spokespeople, writers, painters, rap artists, jazz musicians, all the regular people that you could find doing their thing. You will never make it in the media because the establishment, they hate us that much. So many of these guests that you will see as oddballs on the Beyond Vaudeville show or the Howard Stern show are members of the aristocrat class or members of the MK Ultra program who are involved in MK Ultra based crimes. They're all members of the aristocrat class. They're products of incest. And these shows are a fixation on the moralists, the depraved, the inbred, and the retarded. These people are not amusing. These people are not entertaining. It's an insult on us when they do this. So Howard Stern appears to have the genetic disorder of gigantism, which is said to be caused by excess GH, which stands for growth hormone. So excess GH will be secreted by the pituitary gland in children while they are still developing, and this causes the genetic disorder of gigantism. So the genetic disorder gigantism is said to be very rare, with only 100 cases recorded in the United States so far. Yet there is not a clear height definition which defines which extremely tall individuals have gigantism. What the establishment will not tell you is that gigantism is believed to be caused by the alien manipulation on some of the human population's genetics on Earth to create a race of people who are more similar to the Drac, reptilian, or amphibian alien species. The Drac aliens are a tall species who are often 7.5 to 8 feet tall, and their skin is a dark orange or red color. This is Howard Stern's high school photo that I located on Wikipedia, where his appearance is of someone with amphibian alien hybrid characteristics. Just take a look at this photograph. This is what the alien hybrid human populations look like. He kind of looks like a Muppet. He kind of looks like a salamander or a frog. This is what they look like. So this is why NBC and the New York Cable Access show desires to have giants, dwarfs, and deformed people on their talent or counterculture TV shows, because these type of people are often the products of their aristocrat and royal class of people. These people, these hybrids, are also prominent in religious orders, brotherhoods, and secret societies which practice ancient and criminal pagan rites. For an example, investigate the Franklin Credit Union and child prostitution scandal in Omaha, Nebraska. I have 2 documentaries on this so far, entitled Kings of the Occult Part 5 and Kings of the Occult Part 6. There is also the Conspiracy of Silence documentary, which was directed by Nick Gray. And there is a more recent documentary entitled The Franklin Conspiracy, the Satanic Trafficking Cult that America Forgot. And this was produced by Pandox or Patreon.com. However, they state that their video is based on real events. However, names have been changed to protect privacy. So like the Conspiracy of Silence documentary, this is another government-sponsored expose on their own criminal activity. Those two documentaries and reports by Craig Spence, Rusty Nelson, Paul Bonacci, Senator John DeCamp, and Noreen Gosh are all going to be government-produced documentaries and interviews. None of these people are real people. All of these people are agents of the MK Ultra program that produced these documentaries to eclipse people such as myself, John Kelly Harwood Jr. So the best source of information will be the Kings of Occult, Part 5, Part 6, and I'll work on a Part 7 soon. But to familiarize yourself with these subjects, I would also look at the Conspiracy of Silence documentary, which served as a whitewash report. I think in one of the reports, they were asking Troy Boner. That's how they pronounce his name. I thought it was Troy Bonner, but they're pronouncing it Troy Boner. And Troy Boner was describing some of the abuse that he saw at these parties. And he said there was a girl standing in the middle of a room and a guy was touching her nipples. So I think the real reports from real witnesses were describing children being raped, tortured, and murdered by these sick establishment pedophiles. These are all sadists. These are all CIA agents. They love starting wars and murdering people, taking people prisoner, innocent citizens prisoner, and slowly murdering them to produce adrenaline-saturated blood. Usually by burning their victims. Next time you're barbecuing hamburgers, hold your hand over the coals and imagine what it would be like for these sadistic, rich pedophiles to hold people over a barbecue for hours on end, getting their jollies from that, barbecuing little kids to scare them almost to death, and then bleed them out because so much adrenaline has gone into their blood that these perverts will then drink the blood to get high off the drug, to get high off the blood. To say these people are criminal or sadistic is an understatement. There are no words to describe how they really are. These are serial killers. They are all serial killers. So documentaries like the Conspiracy of Silence documentary is a whitewash that only begins to describe human trafficking or pedophile rings. And they made these documentaries to whitewash or eclipse the real reports from real witnesses and real victims. I think what happened was that they took some of the children out of Boys Town and sent them to foster homes, to regular people in the community. And this was part of a organized crime ring to take their junior agents out of Boys Town and put them in regular homes. And then these kids could do things like poison their foster parents, kill their foster parents, let people in at night to murder their foster parents. But instead, somehow, the MK Ultra program lost control over their little junior agents. The MK Ultra mind control program lost control over their little junior agents. And the kids started describing what they were a part of or what they remembered to their foster parents, who went to the foster care review board to tell them what they were hearing. And they went to the police. So of course people like Carol Stitt from the foster review board was involved. The police, like Police Chief Wadman, was one of the names they used. He was involved. That is the whole point that the MK Ultra program has in taking over these whole areas and putting only their people in the police department, in the local government, as teachers in the school. And Boys Town Orphanage is completely controlled by the aristocrats, the rich 1%, and the MK Ultra program as well. In fact, Boys Town should be considered something like a military barracks for youth agents. So what also happened is that regular kids who lived in the Omaha, Nebraska area would meet some of these agents from Boys Town. They would meet some of these kids from Boys Town at a park, at the basketball court, at the video arcade, at the pool hall, at the lake, wherever kids hang out. So these children, so these youth agents that lived in Boys Town, they would approach regular children in the Omaha area and they would often tell them that they know where parties are, or they would offer them drugs. Probably first gateway drugs like marijuana or acid or shrooms. And then they would get them addicted to harder drugs. And they would often say they know where parties are, where probably older pedophiles who own houses and had alcohol and drugs at these houses. So regular kids from the Omaha, Nebraska area were being pulled into these circles. And of course, these junior agents from Boys Town were involved. They probably weren't orphans, but members of these aristocrat families. They were members of these different orders, these Roman Catholic religious orders. And they would try to lure these regular kids to these parties to kill them, to offer them drugs, get them drunk, and then abduct and kill them. And for some reason, for what I would call an act of God, They were unable to do that. But some of these regular children or regular young people saw a little bit about what was happening at these parties. They saw stuff that looked satanic. They saw how the people were acting. They may have seen something like kiddie porn or even a snuff film on TV. If the youth agents from Boys Town and the pedophiles that controlled these parties thought that they were going to kill these people that they lured over there, they may have dropped their guard, and these witnesses saw things that they wouldn't normally see. And they are the source of real reports that you're not going to hear about on the Conspiracy of Silence documentary or the follow-up documentary, The Franklin Conspiracy, the satanic trafficking cult that America forgot. So next, I want to discuss the secret identity of President Harry S. Truman, also known as Vig Hall the First. So that's a good name, Hall. I think that name was chosen because it means a Freemasonic hall. This guy was so big into Freemasons, he named himself after a Freemasonic hall. It's a code word for the Freemasons. So Harry S. Truman, also known as Vig Hall the First, was born in the year 1884 and served as president from 1945 to 1953. He was most likely a high-ranking member of the CIA. He has also been identified to be the corporate raider Eli M. Black, who was supposedly born in the year 1921, and that would make him 37 years younger than President Harry S. Truman. But again, the establishment can easily lie about the birth dates of many of their agents, and they do that on purpose so that numerous agents could act under that identity. Often that identity gets passed from father to son, so they pick a birth year kind of in the middle so that the son could use that identity. So after serving as President of the United States from 1945 to 1953, Harry S. Truman then changed his identity to Eli M. Black, who took over the CIA's United Fruit Company. That was a banana importer. The United Fruit Company was most likely a CIA front company that imported bananas, and they did do that. But they also used that company for military operations against Central America. So some background on Eli M. Black is that he received training to become an Orthodox Jewish rabbi. And Eli M. Black's father was a shohet, which is a butcher or a ritual slaughterer of mammals and birds, is the definition I found. So Eli M. Black, also known as President Harry S. Truman, began his career in investment banking with Lehman Brothers, and he was hired to act as the chairman for the American Seal Cap Company, AMK, which manufactured caps for milk bottles. So as a corporate raider, Eli Black used AMK, the American Seal Cap Company, as a vehicle for corporate takeovers. In 1968, Eli M. Black, also known as President Harry S. Truman, bought 733,000 shares of United Fruit, becoming the largest shareholder at United Fruit. In 1970, Eli Black, also known as President Harry S. Truman, merged his company, AMK, with United Fruit, and that became United Brands. So to give you some background on the United Fruit Company, it was a CIA front that had exploited and taken over a large part of Central America through the banana export business in countries like Guatemala, Colombia, El Salvador, Honduras, Cuba, and Costa Rica. United Fruit constructed banana plantations, railroads. They established the Tropical Radio and Telegraph Company and became the largest employer in Central America. In the 1930s, United Fruit owned 3.5 million acres of land in Central America and the Caribbean. In 1954, the CIA armed and trained a military force that deposed the democratically elected government of Guatemala and installed a military dictatorship because the Guatemalan government had begun to distribute unused United Fruit Company lands to landless Guatemalan peasants. So United Fruit Company had taken over 3.5 million acres of land all over Central America. And if the South American governments tried to give some of that to the citizens of their country to live on, the CIA would assassinate those government leaders or overthrow that government and then set up their puppet governments and set up their military dictatorships. In 1954, Allen Dulles, the then current director of the CIA, was also a board member of United Fruit. The CIA continued to plan and carry out assassinations and overthrows of Central American governments, like in Guatemala, to then establish military dictatorships that went along with the corporate agenda of the CIA. In 1960, Fidel Castro of Cuba accused United Fruit of aiding Cuban exiles in starting a seaborne invasion of Cuba directed by the United States military. In 1961, the CIA organized the failed Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba. If the Bay of Pigs invasion would have been successful, it would have been a full-scale war against Cuba, resulting in the CIA-trained forces murdering tens of thousands of innocent civilians of Cuba. Again, this is a major practice of the elite, which considers war, secret invasions of countries, concentration camps, torture, murder, and murder for entertainment their only meaning to life. This is what they live for. This is the only thing that these sadistic pedophiles are interested in doing. And they are also involved in harvesting humans for adrenaline, organs, and as a food supply. The elite, the names that I'm mentioning, are involved in murdering people and then selling them as a food supply in the form of hamburger meat. And this human hamburger meat was then sold to the masses through corporations like McDonald's. In the 1960s in Central America, there was a lot of protest against the CIA's United Fruit Company. And the plantations which they owned, which treated the workers very poorly and kept them impoverished. They would also attack and murder innocent citizens and their employees of these plantations, especially those who tried to stand up against them and demand better working conditions or better pay or better housing. So this, the CIA's method of controlling the people of South America, is what promoted the rise of communism. So they refer to the CIA and these giant corporations like United Fruit as imperialist capitalism that exploited workers through monopoly corporations like United Fruit. So, in 1968, when Eli M. Black, also known as Harry S. Truman, bought the United Fruit Company, he was essentially acting as another agent of the CIA who was allowed or approved to take over the giant CIA-run corporate operation that controlled a large amount of Central America. On the Eli Black Wikipedia page, there is then a missing section of information from 1970 to 1975. They've excluded all information, everything that took place during that time period. So in 1970, Eli Black merged United Fruit with his American Cap Company, which was one of America's top 500 companies. Then the next thing written is that in 1975, sometime after paying $1 million bribe to the president of Honduras to obtain a reduction on export taxes, Eli Black supposedly committed suicide, which is obviously a lie. It is reported that in 1974, the governments of Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama attempt to form a banana exporting union, which demanded a banana export tax, which would be paid by the large corporations like United Fruit, also known as United Brands, also known as Chiquita Banana. So Eli M. Black also known as Harry S. Truman, may have been selected by the CIA to take over the United Fruit Company at that time in order to negotiate terms with the South American dictators and politicians, which always demanded payoffs in order to keep everything in the same state, in the same legal state. Because at that time, there were a lot of protests for workers' rights, for citizens' rights in these different countries from Central America. And quite often, they are called communists, which became a political party in South America. So my guess is that the CIA created many of these communist parties as well. If you don't like imperial capitalism, join the communists. Because the communists are going to be the only people against imperial capitalism. And then the CIA would tell the Americans, we're at war with all of these communist groups from Central America that secretly work for Russia. And they want to bring nuclear weapons over to South America to threaten the people of the United States with. The only thing those people wanted to do was earn enough money to feed their families, to survive. The CIA had stolen 3.5 million acres of land from them. They had taken over all of the countries in South America. They brought in communism to South America. And then they said, look, they got a bunch of communists in our backyard. So we want to get approval from U.S. citizens to attack these communists. And you have stuff like the Bay of Pigs invasion. So if you were a citizen of South America, you'll be living in your house, and the Bay of Pigs invasion would be soldiers kicking down your door while you're cooking dinner for your kids one night, and then they could attack and kill your family. And you're not even a communist, because the main point to these sadistic inbreds, like the Hall family, like the Stern family, like the Rothschild family, like the royal family from England, like Larry King, the white reporter from CNN, also known as the serial killer Richard Speck. The only thing important to them is to murder people. They are in love with murder and death. It is their hobby. It is their interest. It is their art form. They are in love with death. They are necrophile. They are a psychotic race of inbreds. The world's fortunes are being willed to their little mentally retarded inbred children. This is why our world is in such a chaotic, messed up state, because of these people. And this is part of the alien agenda. It doesn't matter how inbred these people are if they're under the control of the Greys, if they're under the control of the aliens. The aliens prefer their vessels, their androids, to be brain dead, because the aliens do all the thinking for them. Without the aliens telling them what to do, they kind of walk around like zombies. So Eli M. Black, also known as Harry S. Truman, has been selected by the CIA to take over United Fruit. He made some bribes or payoffs to these Central American dictators, and then he supposedly committed suicide when some of this was made public in the news. So they said he smashed a window in his office with his attaché and then jumped to his death. This was a lie. They said that he did this because United Brands the United Fruit Company became crippled with debt. So if United Fruit became crippled with debt, Eli Black, also known as Harry S. Truman, may have borrowed a lot of money, pocketed that money, and then faked his own death. He paid off some of his dictator buddies from South America who are more CIA agents, and then he faked his own death. So again, Harry S. Truman, also known as Vich Hall I, had two sons, Vich Hall Jr. and Ben Hall, also known as Leon Panetta, former CIA Director Leon Panetta, who could have acted as Eli M. Black II. So after his supposed death, after Eli Black committed suicide, it says Seymour Milstein and his brother Paul Milstein bought into United Fruit, and also the American Financial Group Incorporated bought into United Fruit. The American Financial Group was one of billionaire Carl Lindner Jr.'s companies. So Carl Lindner Jr., who bought the United Fruit United Brands Company, has been identified to be Eli Black's son, Ben Hall, also known as CIA Director Leon Panetta, also known as Carl Lindner Jr. So billionaire Carl Lindner Jr., also known as Ben Hall, is Howard Stern's uncle. So that is what happens when you hear of these giant monopoly corporations going into debt or going bankrupt and then selling to other huge monopoly corporations. It's just these networks of the elite selling the business to each other. They have different identities. They have different giant monopoly corporations that they control. They state that these giant monopoly corporations have gone bankrupt, and then they sell them to their family members or to other corporations that they control. So when these corporations go bankrupt, these billionaires are pocketing all of the money. Where is all this money going that causes these giant corporations to go bankrupt? It's going into the pocket of Harry S. Truman, also known as Eli M. Black. It's going into the pocket of CIA Director Leon Panetta, also known as Eli Black II, also known as billionaire Carl Lindner Jr. So it just keeps on going around in circles. So in 1926, United Fruit Company, along with RCA, GE, and AT&T, founded NBC. This is a giant monopoly or a conglomerate. NBC, which stands for National Broadcasting Company, is the television company. RCA, which stands for Radio Corporation of America, is an electronics company that manufactures TVs. AT&T stands for the American Telegraph and Telephone Company. And United Fruit was the CIA-controlled agricultural company that exported bananas to the United States, creating what are known as banana republics, or small nations which rely on its natural resource for export and are exploited by giant corporations. They are called banana republics. So when Howard Stern states that he is some type of underdog, which is persecuted by the upper management of NBC and has fought them to have his freedom of speech on the radio, this is a joke. Not only is Howard Stern the upper management or one of the owners of NBC, he is also part of the group which exploits South America and will not even pay these people a percentage of what they need to survive. Of course, that is the entire point, so that the British military and the CIA network will be able to abduct and murder millions of South Americans whose society and economy have been destabilized. Then, this same group has also attacked different parts in America. For example, Chicago, Illinois, Omaha, Nebraska, West Memphis, Arkansas, the entire state of New Hampshire, where they then set up child prostitution and child killing rings, which are often called satanic cults, due to their subhuman and malevolent criminal actions. If they are arrested for their crimes, they will use identities such as Lawrence E. King Jr., the manager of the Franklin Credit Union, Eddie Lee Sexton, Estella Sexton, William Sexton, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, David Berkowitz, John Wayne Gacy, Fred West, Rose West, Leonard Lake, Charles Ng, Cary Stayner, William Bonin, and Bob Berdella, Robin Gecht, or Richard Speck, which is a code for ecclesiastic, which means a priest, a rabbi, or a member of the clergy. So, United Fruit, which founded NBC, was owned by Howard Stern's grandfather and uncle, Vig Hall and Ben Hall, also known as Eli Black and Carl Linder. And Howard Stern's father has been identified as serial killer Richard Speck, also known as CNN reporter Larry King #1, also known as actor Robert Reed, also known as Peter Citron, the columnist for the newspaper in Omaha, Nebraska. Howard Stern has also been identified as Peter Citron #2, who was named by the victims in Omaha, Nebraska as one of the main pedophiles in the area. So these are some of the most wealthy men in the world who are agents of the MK Ultra program and the CIA. Howard Stern's father is identified to be the serial killer Richard Speck, also known as Robert Reed, who was a homosexual man who contracted HIV. So this is not a traditional family. This is a network of homosexual men. So when you look at Howard Stern and you see the face that he shows you, like on his movie Private Parts, that is a face that he's taken from regular citizens to fool you with. Howard Stern is not married. He doesn't have a wife. The children produced in his home are like his little boyfriends. Oftentimes these men will marry their own sons, or they will trade their sons who were programmed by them to be little homosexuals with other pedophiles in their network. They will trade sons and then marry their sons in wedding ceremonies. And these women that they're producing children with are their cousins, are their sisters, and their aunts. And these are the type of people that have no problem going along with the operations and the business models that I have described in this report.